Hi, welcome to my video. Excuse me, my voice is going. This is part of the series The Writing on the Wall, just where I discuss things that I find interesting, maybe some psychic knowings, intuitions, or news that I think is important to get out there. So there's pretty much been a huge anonymous dump, and the fabulous Ben Norton from the Grey Zone has really deciphered a lot of it already in his article. I'll try and find the link to put in there in the description box for you to go and click. It's important whether you're in some of my brothers and sisters in the USA or whether you're in the UK, that we all look at it because it affects us all greatly. So this is Syria, or how we paid, writing on the wall. It is the 28th of September 2020. Now there's been a very recent anonymous dump that has been brought to people's attention that really does bring home the questions of the current things we're going through right now that affect us. Both in the UK and the USA, on the shiny surface, we're used to paying for things, we're used to hearing about terrible things in other places, and we tend to be able to maintain a shiny surface to the rest of the world, or so we think. That's what we are told, and this is all about what we are told, because we look at right now, the Syrian mercenaries, and I'm reading from notes. If you guys know me, you know I need notes, I need the written thing. So the Syrian mercenaries in Nagorno-Karabakh, I think that is pronounced, transferred by the Turkish regime, Erdogan, saying they'll finish the problem in Nagorno-Karabakh, Azerbaijan. I hope I did that justice. I know I probably didn't, but I hope you can decipher my pronunciation and probably spelling and the Geordie accent on top. You're welcome. So right now that is happening, and them saying that they'll finish this is a huge thing, because the last time they made statements like this, we saw where the Turkish extremist troops made statements like this, we saw nothing less than a genocide to the Armenians, leading up to World War II and throughout World War II, that is hardly ever mentioned in mainstream media. And so this dump speaks about how the UK and the US and others facilitated these Syrian freedom fighters. Which brings me to this now. We have people protesting peacefully around the world. In the UK in particular, every time there has been a protest, there has been a demonstration of real police brutality, needless police brutality. And that is not me getting that from any mainstream pictures, but being sure to live stream via friends that I trust to see exactly what is happening right now. You only have to look at David Cotten, the prospective London mayor. Let's hope he gets in, posting the truth about how brutal and how needlessly abusive the police are being to anyone that's there, even elderly ladies, injuring people for taking up the right to peacefully protest. And so it is a joke, a very, very sick joke, that the government is still in power, the same government, generation after generation of old crones that do not need to be respected anymore because they are not being loyal grandparents of the UK, are still in power and facilitating in a great way, which I'm going to get into, these Syrian freedom fighters, yet their own people who are protesting for freedom so that they can survive, so that they can stay sovereign in their businesses, so they can stay somewhat independent and somewhat able to feed their children and loved ones. The disparity here, the distorted context here is sickening to me. These people are committing treason. to the people who are taking up their right to protest peacefully, while facilitating behind our backs with our taxpayer money people who wantonly genocide innocent people, people who wantonly have discrimination, these Syrian freedom fighters being prejudiced against any kind of sexual preference, being extremely abusive to females. They are either beheaded, raped, murdered, all of it, or they are imprisoned as prostitutes. Children alike, men trying to protect those women and children alike. So these freedom fighters that are committing needless murders facilitated in pounds by the UK government are getting the backing of over £100 million, much, much more probably, because this just looks at one aspect of that kind of funding. And we, the taxpayers, paid it. It didn't come out of government's pocket. It didn't come out of their paychecks. We, the taxpayers, have paid to have many, many people needlessly and brutally and cruelly murdered, tortured, and still to this day it's happening, and it looks like we're going to back it again. And so through this anonymous dump and Ben Norton at the Grey Zone, we can decipher exactly what has happened, and hopefully it'll help open some minds, open some eyes and ears as to the psyop that is going on right now regarding the situation that we are in, where we are losing our freedoms minute by minute, day by day. And when people say, what's so important about protesting? What's so important about making your voices heard? Because the truth will show you that this is nothing about caring about the British people. This is nothing about caring about people in general. These people in government, totally puppeted by the elitist globalists, the very, very few, will do and say whatever they need to do and say to progress their agenda. And so we go into the fact that we facilitated all of this murder, torture and abuse, and still do. All of this abuse comes down to anything in Syria that is outside of the box of extremist, narrow-minded Islam. Not the norm belief system, the extremist. With Al-Qaeda and ISIS. It is sickening. I'm digesting this information now, even though you know it, but then you get confirmation. It is sickening to process the synchronicities of what is going on right now. And everybody going along with it enough that it's okay when it's done to these evil people over the water. And you think it's not going to happen to you because your government cares about you so much. Well, we're seeing the very brink, the very start of our freedoms being taken and the police being given free rein to beat up elderly women, to break people's skulls during peaceful protest, to arrest doctors professors who in recent days had been in Berlin and got cheered by over 30,000 people for his information on virology and the truth about what's going on right now and the lies about what is going on right now, and then coming to the UK and saying the same speech and getting cheers of over 30,000 people yet again, but getting arrested from Speaker's Corner near Trafalgar Square. The UK government and the systems beneath it, the police, have gone rogue. They've been rogue for a very long time, but for some reason they feel safe enough right now to take off their shiny surface, to let their masks drop. And it's time for everybody in the UK to see it and help stop it, because it is our complacency, our closed eyes, our closed ears, our closed mouths that have allowed this to go on so far. Even our hard-earned money allows this to go on. And so we see that these same people spill out and the protection isn't there. We see that even good officers that seem to have had a character, not that is whitewashed by mainstream, but people in the know who knew the officer in Croydon who sadly got shot by one of these extremists. While this extremist was in cuffs, in custody, this man died at work in a police station by gunshot, by one of these extremists that we have grown, that we have facilitated, that we have funded. There's speaking of 4 people in Paris almost beheaded on the street by yet another extremist from the same group. You see, they've grown and funded these monsters, both the UK and the US government. And then people get a shock when it comes over to here. These are extremists. They'll take whatever help they want. They'll do whatever they need to do to fulfill their agenda. That doesn't mean they've got a handshake that will stick with the governments to say that they won't come and hurt the people on the ground, from the very ground that funded them, from the very people, the hard-working taxpayer pounds that funded them. And so we go on to say, where Azerbaijan and Armenia at the border right now, it is a real tension, which again looks to Russia to be pulled in to try and stop this. And you know, a lot of people are saying maybe that is the plan. And so we've got the crimes that committed in Syria by these fanatics. Ben Norton has broken down and made sense in his article of this anonymous dump in the Grey Zone Project. They got a very fair press in the UK. There was over 100 million pounds, and that's what we know of, given to one, help train journalists so that they would get the captures that they wanted for the propaganda that they wanted, to make it look like the Syrian government that actually does have an ethos of equal rights to all differences, to make it look like it was needed, it was necessary. So they turn the better guys, I won't say good guys, but the better guys into bad guys, and the bad guys into these funded good guys. And so with that being said, we see that's what we call the white helmets. These are the journalists that were trained to get the shot, to fit the narrative that the UK and the USA government was wanting. Absolutely taken away and trained. Your taxpayer money did that. It paid to train these journalists to get the shot and the headline that would ultimately lie to you. This is fraud. It's both psychological warfare and fraud, because they're taking that taxpayer money while saying the NHS is so strapped, the police is so strapped, social services is so strapped, mental illness, oh, it's so strapped, got no money for that. But yet they can put this money into training these cowards wanting to be in the limelight as journalists to get the shot that fits the narrative that they're trying to sell. And so now we have the receipts of this through this anonymous dump. And so we see that these white hats that were doing all so good were actually very, very dark. We saw them cover things like fake chemical attacks. We saw them release certain videos that would fit the narrative and look a certain way and horrify us into being triggered into supporting the government in the decisions they made thereafter. We saw this take us nearly into World War III over Burma with Russia, the USA and the UK. There was a very tentative point there, very tense moment there that we nearly went into World War III. So we see that this has been through this anonymous dump. And look at this Ben Norton article, please. We see that this has been an international propaganda initiative. We see that over 1,600 plus journalists were involved in being trained just to cover Syria. And of course, that's money well spent, because those journalists now are trained to cover to fit any narrative that comes thereafter. The journalists failed to mention throughout the ethnic cleansing the extreme torture to women and children. The nice, shiny, politically correct governments of Denmark, Netherlands and the UK and more all paid for the very extreme abuse. They all made us be the conduit to pay for all of this extremist abuse, where any difference of opinion from extremist Islam wasn't tolerated. So while we were all sitting pretty here and, you know, fighting for our rights and getting more rights here for gay people, more rights here for transgender people, more rights here for women, and they were fooling us. They were effing us hard with a prickly stick. Because while we thought we were having such breakthroughs, every bloody pound ended up dripping in blood. Every pound, every taxpayer pound that went into this. There's blood on our hands. And so we see that it tells us that ARC, A-R-K, and the Global Strategy Network, TGSN, which is part of MI6, was running a global, and still is, rebel media operations for the UK and others. A quote in this anonymous dump from them is to follow UK guidelines on gender sensitivity. Now, that didn't mean global guidelines to be followed by the letter. It meant that the pictures and the headlines had to look like they followed UK guidelines for gender sensitivity. Idlib, Al-Qaeda affiliates also had social media pages ran by the above TGSN and ARC. They were running their PA, they were running their social media pages with UK taxpayer money for their campaign development. The UK government and others advised to create events that could be reported upon. So not go and report upon real events that were really happening, to create events, to create Photoshop moments. This is where we see the famous father that was so censored and it was shut down pretty quick, but the video is still available out there where the father says, my son was happy, he was fine, he was playing on the street. The next thing I know, somebody's picked him up off the street and put water in his eyes, and they're taking a picture to say he's been squirted with some kind of chemical. And the footage of that coming out. Was there uproar? A tiny bit. Was it talked about until there was full answers? No. And so we see how easy it is for them to do this with all of these millions and millions of pounds. It was said that it needed to it boasted, that they made the secular Syrian government that maintains equal rights made it look like it was equal to ISIS. This includes the BBC, Channel 4, The Guardian, The Times, The New York Times and The Washington Post and more, with them being big players in this big psychological warfare. The propaganda in mainstream comes directly from governments. Stop watching mainstream news. Stop watching the very thing that takes your pound that you have worked so hard for and been so ethical to try and get within the guidelines that these sick governments put in place to limit what we can do, and put blood on it. A lot of blood. Innocent blood. They are not independent. This is why channels like this and others are so important. And it's so important that we maintain the freedom of speech, which is why these protests are so important. When people are asking the question, why is it so important? I got asked a question about protest, what I think it can do. One, I know it can be infiltrated easily, but if we shy away from everything that they infiltrate, then we may as well just take the lethal injection now. Because they're insidious, they're everywhere, they're cancerous in every good movement. And it was likened to a child not getting their favourite toy having a tantrum. The people that are protesting in the main know things like this. So it's nothing about toys. It's about fraud. It's about lies. It's about corruption. And ultimately, it is about innocent lives. And the death of which being paid for on the back of hard-working citizens. Without this dump, we would not know this. So how does this not make you question how agile and how good they can be at making a picture look so different to reality? Look at the current circumstance that we're in. We've seen contradiction, contradiction after contradiction, lie after lie after lie. We've watched them in Parliament literally admit that they are breaking international law, breaking civil rights laws. And still we believe them. Still we live in fear from the very things that sometimes they create a reality of. Real death, 9/11. But more often than not, it's an illusion. It's a black magician's trick, a low frequency magician's trick. What else are the CIA, MI6 and all of the others hiding? If they could be so bold and so brash as to take taxpayer money and put it into a lift up, a whitewash, an uplifting of the image of sick fanatics like this to meet their agenda, to actually train journalists in getting the shot that doesn't really exist, to create the shot that did not exist before the props and makeup person was brought in. Over 9 years now, we have been bombarded with propaganda to keep feeding this lie, to keep feeding that we're doing the right thing somehow, some way, that we had to invade Syria. We are the targets of mass psychological warfare. This is not recent. They've just gotten better at it. Technology has allowed them to be better at it. But at the same time, technology will also be their downfall. Because in World War II, we couldn't get dumps like this from Anonymous. In World War II, people couldn't speak to each other from around the world in real time, second by second. So let's let it get away from them. Let's put so much truth out there and listen to those truths and discern for ourselves and continuously question ourselves if we're looking through our lenses or if we're looking through their lenses, through their perceived truth. And we definitely need to do that more than ever right now in the current circumstances that we're in. Because these people create problems to cover up bigger, darker agendas. So if they have gone to the effort of creating something that we are not seeing the evidence of, and many professionals are not seeing the evidence of, then what the hell are they up to? We hear crickets on mainstream media, re this dump, re these truths that have come out. How are we so different to the Koreans, who we say are such conformists, who have had such psychological warfare done on them for so long that they can't see anything but the government's perception of truth? How are we so different? How are we so different when we literally will put ourselves in house arrest on the back of what these people are saying, these very people that have done this kind of thing time and time and time again? When did we stop being the creative beings, the animals that we are, and using our own discernment, our own senses to look to see what is true and what is not? Rather than continuously, when did mainstream media, and when I say mainstream media, I'm saying governments, because that is who creates them and allows them to exist. When did they become our eyes, our ears, and our mouths? When did we allow that? Because it's time to stop. What other operations against our minds are involved here? Now it makes you question, doesn't it, that likes of Venezuela, Belarus, even China, Russia, Libya, COVID. The US and the UK justified the Vietnam War, also justified the Libyan War and the Iraqi War. You know, if you remember the Iraqi War, there was nuclear weapons that was going to kill us all. Did they find any? Did they shite? Just last week in Parliament, I watched them live stream where they brought up the fact that you were asking us to break the laws again in the equal measure that you did when you asked us to go into an illegal Iraqi war. They openly admit it if you watch them and listen to them, and stop listening to the mainstream news, and stop putting money in the pockets of the papers that put this information into your mind, that create this psychological warfare, that cast this dark spell. Stop it. Stop paying a TV license for the very people that there is more proof of child abuse, that there is more proof of them facilitate in war, and not just facilitate in war, but facilitate in your consent to it, when there was no real need for any of these wars. When does it stop? If people think I'm crazy, fine. But what I want to say is, 7 months ago, or even last year, when people like me and others were telling people that they could feel something like this coming, that people would be under house arrest. If people came up to you and said, do you realise they're going to put a headline in the paper about a lack of toilet roll, when there was no lack of toilet roll, and millions of pounds of profit are going to be made overnight because people are going to flood and have fights in the shops worldwide around toilet roll. But it wasn't worldwide. It was just in the USA and the UK. We need to stop being so big-headed, because the only reason we are big-headed and think we are the saviors of the world is because our dark governments tell us so. Our dark governments feed our ego to somehow make us feel en masse at some kind of superiority, that we, can go into these countries that are also broken when they're not. We create them to be broken, but then we really go in and we really break them. We build up and fund ISIS, Al-Qaeda. We build up and we fund these monsters to go and do the dirty work. But they're our monsters. They wouldn't have had the power that they've got if it wasn't for US dollars and UK pounds. And so if you're still questioning, and if you're still abiding and putting on your mask like a good little boy and a good little girl, and if you're not, seeing your friends and family, and if you're not opening up your business because you're terrified, then, we're doomed. Because even when the truth is right in our face, we see what real mental illness exists. When we can have the truth given to us, when we can, if we open our eyes and ears, actually see and hear the truth loudly and still deny it and still comply and still trust like little children the governments that have turned us over and used our pounds to kill, to torture, rape and abuse people around the world. I've known quite a few very abused children, and it's always surprised me. And then I learned more about being a mother and having a child, and being able to look through that lens when I became a mother, in that children, even when they are abused terribly by a parent, still mourn for that parent as a child, still trust that parent again and again and again. We need to grow up. We need to be adults. We need to finally realize what a huge psychological warfare we've been in since well before World War II. And we need to realize that that includes the history that has been written. That there was a time before this, a time before Roman rule. That maybe, just maybe, if I'm right and if others are right, we lived in peace. We respected each other's tribes and each other's individualisms, because we respected the realm, the mother, the creative life source that we were given and that we stood upon. So have a look at that anonymous dump. Have a look at the great work of Ben Norton from the Grey Zone, of how he broke it down. I hope I just made just enough sense for you guys to go and look at the professionals' work, who to really do this justice, to really do the people of Syria justice. It's time for change. Much love, stay balanced and stay whole.